Homicides rising with senseless acts of violence.
Probably about 5 or 6 that went out on the stretcher that I saw.
It was riddled with bullets.
The innocent caught in the crossfire, a stain on our community as fears grow.
My frustration is that grandmas don't feel comfortable sitting on the porch anymore, that people don't feel comfortable going out to dinner anymore.
The hope now for solutions to a problem that's plagued Birmingham for years.
It's going to get worse before it gets better if we don't all play a part.
Tonight, Operation Crime and Justice.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Valerie Bell.
And I'm Kyra Purvis. As our communities reel from the threat of violence, we are focusing on the solutions, moving the conversation forward with an eye towards what is working in other cities.
Now, we have several guests joining us, lawmakers, advocates, and law enforcement. But first, let's take a deeper dive into the latest crime statistics and hear from those in our community. Here in Birmingham's Railroad Park, people were out and about enjoying the day. It's somewhere in the city people don't shy away from.
I still feel safe.
Homicides in Birmingham are in the triple digits for the year.
Just more on alert and probably just stay in mostly.
It's frightening, but I think it doesn't stop me from walking around and doing my things.
I feel safe, I guess, because I don't really get out and mingle a lot on the outside.
The city has seen 2 deadly mass shootings just months apart, both happening where several people were gathered.
I say I am a person that doesn't really like to go out, but just in case one day I do decide that I want to go out, then I'm kind of iffy, that kind of throws up a red flag for me.
Homicides in Birmingham are up nearly 27% compared to this time last year. However, crime in categories such as rape, robbery, aggravated assault, and auto theft are all down. It's the shootings that are causing concern for many.
You can be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's just, like you said, it's just really unfortunate.
Crystal Washington even worries about her children's safety in their own home.
It is scary. Like, you don't know what to do. You can be on the floor and still a bullet can come through your house, or I done had a time where a bullet came over my kid's bed, so it's just have to keep working to get out this neighborhood.
Washington believes safety initiatives like the one in Eastlake are a step in the right direction. She thinks more cameras and better relationships between police and the community would also help.
If you see something, say something. And I know people are afraid to call 911. They're afraid of retaliation, but we gotta try to break that barrier.
Now, we will be hearing more from members of our community moving forward in our town hall, but first, we want to start with our first panel here. We have representing Jefferson County District Attorney here, Danny Carr. We have State Representative Wandalyn Gavan. Here we have D'Angelo Hall with the Fraternal Order of Police. And then here on the end here, we have Dimitri Carpenter. He is actually a victim of crime. He lost 2 brothers to crime. So thank you all so much for joining us here.
Now, I want to start with you, Mr. Carpenter. I mean, you have personally been impacted by this. You know how it feels. In your opinion, what needs to change right now in the city of Birmingham?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but I think it's a good question. I would first say the same thing that I said 2 years ago when I lost 2 of my brothers 9 months apart. The heart conditions of the young people in our city has to change. And I don't think it's one answer to that. I think it goes back to how I grew up in Collegeville, where you would often hear it takes a village. And getting back to having those kind of neighborhoods is important. I don't know how you do that, but I think it takes a collection of places from church, business to residents on every block just owning their communities. And I think that's how we get back to a lot of that. And so I think it's a tall task, but it's worth doing the hard work.
Now, I know Representative Gavan, you have mentioned several times that, this is not going to happen overnight. From your perspective as a state leader, what can we do?
First of all, let me say to Mr. Carter, my condolences in the loss of your relatives and loved ones. It's not going to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. The realization is we are in a pandemic state, whether you want to admit it or not. Mm-hmm. If there's one life lost, that's one life too many. This is not about a blame game. It's not about how we got here now. It's about how do we solve it? How do we remedy this issue? So for me, as I've been going about, I've been looking at it from whether it be a ministerial perspective, whether it be a parent, teacher, educator, student perspective. I've also been looking at it, I've been reaching out to people who are criminals, who have been in the penal system, that are not out, that are out. As we call them in where I came from, the OGs. So I've literally, my office has been inundated. But not only that, I've been talking with law enforcement, a number of law enforcement officers here within the city of Birmingham. My role as a state legislator is simple. I'm going to listen, but I'm also going to offer my take on it to try to work with whomever that wants to work to bring it to some type of solution. At the end of the day, I just listened to a young lady speak about seeing something and saying something. No, we've got to do something now. And although crime is down, listen, bullets are not down within the city of Birmingham, and that in itself brings us to that pandemic state.
Mr. Hall, would you like to add anything to what Representative Gavan had just talked about?
Well, they're both right. My condolences to you, brother, because I know I've been there, and this is something that we never get back from. And to add to that, you really are looking at a multi-factor situation. I think Brother Hilliard said it best. It's all of us. We have to peel back all of these layers. From when a child is born and living in a household of his family, they have to be raised there. Then you have the church. Then you have the school. You see, all of these factors are going to play a part, and they all have to be involved. We cannot just limit it to just law enforcement. We have to make it all of us, and we all have to play our part to get this back in where it needs to be.
I'd like to direct that over to the DA. You know, unfortunately, a lot of times that you see these people and these families, they've already been impacted in one way or another. What's your approach on this?
You know, my approach is multifaceted. Let me first say, there's no feeling like getting a call that a loved one has been killed. So you have my condolences as well, because I've lived that. And I see it through my mother's eyes even every day. It's still there, it never leaves. But as district attorney, one thing that I understand is that there's a saying that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And what I mean by that is, when you're having a seat at the table as a leader, you know, leadership is not about being right, it's about making things right. And you have to make things right by sometime admitting that there's a problem, figuring out a way that as a community, we can eradicate that problem. And sometimes those remedies may be a little unorthodox. Just because things have been done a certain way for a certain period of time doesn't necessarily mean that that is the solution. And I think I put an analogy real quick like a football team. People on a football field, they get in a huddle, but they come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different races, different political parties, different religions. But they call a play in the huddle, and then they go to their respective positions and run that play to win the game. As a community, we have to get in the huddle, break that huddle, and run that play or that mission to win our communities back. And I think at the end of the day, that is a huge part of the message, that we got to get out of our silos, and all of us got to play our part and carry our corner to eradicate this issue.
Now, I want to jump in here because you all mentioned this is a collaborative effort, obviously. Law enforcement, the community leaders, city, state. I want to go back to you, Mr. Hall. You know, a lot of people, the first thing to point at is law enforcement. What are the things that law enforcement are struggling with right now that could possibly have any kind of impact on this?
Relationship is going to be key. When I was growing up, we had programs like Explorer, Dare, Brute, Ping, PAT. All of those were places where law enforcement were constantly at. And they were not necessarily in uniform. They was there as a community person or community leader. So you grow up learning how to respect authority. And that is going to be a tremendous key. If you're not getting that in your home and you're having to go to some of these recreation centers, which are now struggling to have any kids at, we have to get back to that primary village route. Gotcha. And that's really is bringing the kids out, getting them from behind that video game, getting them off that cell phone, putting them in math, science, and English classes, making sure that they're better prepared to be a better person and a better citizen for the future. So we have a lot of work to do.
Now, we do have to cut really quickly, but we will come back to this topic right here.
And we have much more to cover, obviously. Our conversations continue with local leaders, but first, more of what we're hearing from our communities.
It's the generation we're living in right now, but start at the schools, talk to the youth at the schools, go to the neighborhoods, talk to the youth in the neighborhoods. It's plenty people can do, but mainly police presence around this area and areas that people go out and drink and have a good time protect us.
We absolutely need gun reform, but it doesn't mean that there'll be any, no one's taking away anyone's guns. I just do think that there needs to be stronger enforcement.
There's just not enough surveillance, not enough people watching.
I think as a community, we think of young teenagers as causing the problem in our communities. While I think there's a point to that, and we do have decedents who are teenagers, the median age is in the late 20s, early 30s.
Birmingham's homicide numbers topping 120 by mid-October. It's a staggering increase from 10 years ago when there were 90 for the entire year. And right now we are on pace to exceed what had been a 2-year decline, 96% caused by gunshots, the majority of the victims, black males. Most homicides in West and East Birmingham.
There's a lot of different viewpoints from people who both live and work in the city. And now we'll hear from our other guests. We have with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office spokesperson Henry Irby. We have LaTanya Tate with Birmingham City Council, who is also the chairwoman of the Public Safety Committee. We have Sheila Tyson with the Jefferson County Commission, and we have State Representative Alan Treadway, who has also spent many years in law enforcement himself.
Now, we want to start with you, Representative Treadway. You heard that side coming from the coroner of Jefferson County. You have had a long career in law enforcement. The crime that you're seeing right now, what is the difference from what you were seeing maybe 10 years ago?
Well, it's very alarming, number one. There's a lot of lives here affected, but if we don't do something about the staffing levels that are at a critical shortage right now in this county, as we sit here, there's approximately 500 fewer officers than we had a decade ago. So that right there is a major problem. And I am encouraged that the mayor and the city council just approved funding for recruitment retention. And but I would caution everybody, we didn't get here overnight. It's going to take a while to get those numbers up. And another number nobody's really talking about is a clearance rate. We are clearing less of these cases than we ever have before. So families are not getting closure. We're emboldening criminals. And so you're seeing violent crime, especially in the homicides, very high. These individuals have to be held accountable. We've got to get officers back on the street. And that's going to be a key to bring these numbers back down.
Right. And on the Jefferson County Sheriff's side of things, kind of what are the struggles when it comes to filling those positions?
Well, we are recruiting from the same small pool of candidates, right? And so we have to be more intentional on our recruiting efforts.
Right. Now, going over to the city of Birmingham, Councilwoman Tate, you have public safety under your belt. Do you believe that we're doing enough in the city of Birmingham when it comes to attacking this problem?
Well, I can say that efforts are there. We cannot police our way out of this. They've given you the answers. When it comes to law enforcement, I am retired law enforcement, but I don't have as much skin in the game as these gentlemen do, but I'm not oblivious to what needs to happen. CBOs, community-based violence organizations, need to be invested in.
And we can't tell the sheriff what to do, but we can partner with our municipalities within Jefferson County. And we have partnered with Birmingham. We have several programs that's up and running, but it's going to take time. It's going to take investments dead in the community, not around, but in the community. We have the HEAT program that is in place. It has 4 or 5 different components to that. I brought a lot of the paperwork because I would like for y'all to see it. We have the hospital linked to violence program where all of the people that has been shot have gun violence, and they have people to come out directly to the emergency room right when they are at the hospital. We have that program. We have a mental health program that's already in the public school system that, and it's actually doing very well, and it actually is covering all 23 communities. So, but you never hear anyone talking about the work that is being done, but it has been investments put in there. We're looking at PING. That program, we lost that program, Partners in Neighborhood Growth. We lost a lot of program. When they cut programs, the first thing they cut is children, and they cut senior citizens programs. And the county has invested in youth detention, where we're getting ready to rebuild on the same location because of the condition that youth detention is in, not because we are trying to house more children, but we're trying to give them the wraparound services that they need and their families need in order to make them whole.
Speaking about those programs, Councilor Tate, from the city perspective, what's working?
As Commissioner Tyson said, you have the hospital-based violence link program that's ran, the partnership with UAB and the CBO, the community-based violence organization that has taken the lead on that is the Offender Alumni Association. It was a pilot program, started out with 50 participants. Now it's over 100 and something people that are in there with zero retaliation rate. So that program is working very well. So when you're building out an ecosystem and you're building it out from an evidence-based way, when I took my trip to Newark, you had the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Center, which the Brick City Peace Collective was the anchor to that, which houses all of the CBOs, all of the people that did work. You had the hospital, you had colleges, you just had all of the resources that collaborated, that met together and I heard many people say before us that it takes a collaborative effort. And so that is working. The next rollout, and the mayor talked about this, was we're getting ready to roll out the street outreach team. You're gonna need those that are closest to the problem. I will say that again, that are your solution solvers that will work closely in these communities with high-risk individuals, that they can carry a caseload. It's just like a social worker have a caseload, and they're working with these individuals, making sure that they get the services that they need to come out of these high-risk lifestyles. But those that do not want to come out of these high-risk lifestyles, you would just have to face the consequences, that are on the other side. But those that want to, this ecosystem will be built out for you to take advantage of these resources.
And we do have more information about those programs coming up from the mayor's Birmingham. Next, as homicide numbers rise, Birmingham's mayor announces a new plan to make communities safer. Will it work? We'll have more on that plan coming up.
And I think it's easy to just start railing and let's kind of point fingers at a couple of individuals when it's much more nuanced and it's much more community-based for all of us to do some things differently, and certainly policies that need to be addressed.
A person have to make up their mind, their own mind. Whoever's out engaged in this kind of, activities, so they have to make up their own mind. Like I said, you can't hold the mayor, you can't hold the police chief, you can't hold them accountable.
Now, earlier this month, Birmingham's mayor laid out his new crime plan. Our Gracie Johnson has the breakdown.
Our resolve is very clear to, one, find shooters, find killers and get them off our streets. Bring some form of justice to these families who deserve it.
Birmingham Mayor Randall Woodfin announced an advisory commission made up of business, community, and criminal justice leaders to discover strategies to help reduce homicides in the city. The commission's focus is to gather information on strategies that have helped other cities find solutions to reduce crime.
The bottom line is this homicide issue is a wicked problem. And by that I mean it's complex, it's resistant to change and resistant to common solutions. So the commission's work is to really get out there and dig into successful programs that are occurring across the nation and bring those back to Birmingham.
The commission's work will be funded by private resources. The Birmingham Police Foundation will play a role in supporting the commission's work.
It takes more than just cops on the street to do this. It's a collective effort of everyone.
The mayor's initiative closely follows guidelines implemented in Birmingham during the 1990s, when then Mayor Richard Arrington appointed a commission to address an increase in crime.
Using other cities' models that commissioned back in the 90s, with what their efforts led to and recommendations, they did see a reduction in crime.
Now, we did invite Birmingham Mayor Randall Woodfin and Birmingham Police Chief Scott Thurman to be a part of our special today. We also asked if another representative could be sent to have this conversation. Due to scheduling issues, that invitation was declined.
And we'll be back with more local voices working in your community to bring down crime rates.
Probably having more police force out here. I'm in Lakeview a good bit, and I don't see too many police officers around here, so that could be a solution. But then again, it's up to people to not use guns as solutions to problems and disputes as well.
I don't think it's a problem with guns, I think it's a problem with people and the way they look after their guns. In Great Britain right now, they've got a problem with young boys running around with big knives. So that's what they've got access to. It's not called education and parents.
Now we're continuing our conversation on crime and justice. And when the national homicide rate is falling, why is Birmingham still struggling to stop these killings?
Now we are joined by Executive Director Carla Crowder with Alabama Appleseed, presiding judge for family court Janine Hunt Hilliard. We also have State Senator Roger Smitherman and activist Eric Hall.
Now, I want to start with you, Mr. Hall. We're talking about community activism, that holistic approach. I think that's something that you kind of key in on, and when it comes to addressing this issue, where do we start with that?
Well, what I would say is young people need community to sustain them so that they can deal with disease, dread, despair, despondency, and dilapidation, and what we're seeing is death. And so we need community to come together. It's all hands on deck that have been said before. But what I will say that's different, we have been discussing a lot of money being put into law enforcement. The city of Birmingham have a policing budget of $115 million. In addition to that, they also have the Real-Time Crime Center, which people in the community question, is the Real-Time Crime Center able to solve crime in real time? And so what I would say, if we're going to look at a holistic approach, the same amount of money that lawmakers are putting into policing, we need to put more funding into our communities. What we're seeing now is a result of bad policy. We know that we have a poverty issue in Birmingham, and until we address poverty, we're going to continue to see the rise in violent crime that we're seeing. So a holistic approach will look like investment in affordable housing, more investment in our school system, investment in mental health and substance abuse services, and also workforce development and employment opportunities. I have an opportunity to work with a lot of young people, and we're grateful for those elected officials and leaders like Representative Gavan and others who have come into the community, and they have brought those who may be just as impacted to speak with the young people in the community. And if anyone talks to the young people, they will tell you the issues that we're seeing is about survival. And these kids, unfortunately, they don't really have much hope, and so they have turned to the streets for survival. But I do believe that's something that we can turn around, but we have to give our children hope. We have to invest in them, and we have to show them another direction. And when we see an investment such as $115 million go to our neighborhoods, like $115 million go to policing, then we will see a change in our communities.
Now, Senator Smitherman, I want to get your take on what he just said there with the funding equalization. What do you think about that when it comes to dispersing that money possibly differently?
I think that he has hit one of the areas right on the head. I just have to give it to him. You know, we've got to provide more activities and resources for our young people. You said, well, what are you talking about? I mean, even our park system, we need to have 4 super centers, north, south, east, and west. Then we need to build one just like the Finley Center, where you have all these kids come, you have all those activities there, that they'll have something to do. I heard someone mention about police athletics and those programs. Those programs were the key in many relationships with our young people. You know, I can just give you one quick example. You know, I coach basketball at Ramsey, all the other things I do. And the old way, you could only come out the back of the gym one way with cars and the parents and everybody. It was 2 groups of people at the bottom, gangs you want to call them, having a disagreement. Everybody was trapped there. I walked down there, and the parents said, don't go down there, you're going to get hurt. And I just told myself, I'm not going to be hostage up here because of something happening, and you all shouldn't either. I went down there, and I said, hey, fellows, You see all these cars we're trying to get back. The first thing happened, one of the guys in the car said, "Coach." Well, I had coached him in PAT. And the nickname that we gave him, we called him Killer. Yeah, I said, "Look, that you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Man, we trying to go home." He said, "Man, y'all need to go. You know, we don't need to be doing what we're doing." And they left. It's the relationships that we get out there with these kids, and things that they have to do, provide them job opportunities in the summer. How many of them you seen work in the summertime so they can make that money? You see them with the same T-shirts on and different things. We have got to engage with those young people, just like he's saying, and invest those funds and those resources. It's like the old Fram oil commercial. You either pay me now or we're going to pay them later. And we need to pay now so we won't have to be looking at later.
Right. Now I want to move it over to you. You work with Alabama Appleseed. Now, we had mentioned poverty possibly playing a role in some of this, leading to these crimes. What role does poverty and also possibly substance abuse play in these things?
Well, the problems of concentrated poverty over generations play a huge role. And what we've done in Alabama, and we do a lot of statewide policy, is we look at what we're investing in, how we're spending our money. So we have invested mightily, like Mr. Hall said, in systems of force, of punishment, of incarceration. 25% of the state general fund goes into the prison system. Crimes have already happened if you're in prison, so that's not investing in public safety and preventing crime, right? So right now, we're a very small nonprofit. We get calls from state agencies, from judges. Hey, we have somebody who needs mental health care. Can you help us find mental health care? Why don't we have mental health long-term treatment available in this state? We hear about schools without social workers. Are there enough foster parents? All of these are investments in prevention. And the big state systems, Department of Mental Health, Department of Human Resources, Department of Public Health, they receive a pittance in funding compared to the prison system. And lastly, we've got to talk to survivors of crime about what they need as well. And that commission is funded at, again, it's about $1.5 million. So we are not providing survivors with the trauma care that they need, the counseling, the services. So until we reprioritize and decide we want to care for communities and not just punish people, we will not get out of this trap. This system is solvable. You look at, you mentioned crime rates falling. The city of Boston, Massachusetts, so much bigger than Birmingham, has had less than 15 homicides this year. It's amazing. They have a public health approach, they have community-based investments, and they're closing prisons, so they have those resources to invest in true public safety.
You know, as the presiding judge with family court, I mean, you see a lot of this firsthand, deal with these families, these children, where children may be involved. What are your takeaways on everything that she just said?
Well, what's important is that we invest in preventing these children from actually getting to family court. Once they get to family court, our mandate is rehabilitation. And so, of course, what we're going to do, we do a comprehensive look at what that child needs, the trauma that they've experienced, the problems that they're facing at the time, and begin to work services around that child and around their family in order to begin to change that process. We want to make young people who are good citizens and can go forward and be successful. But the key, I think, to this whole process is making sure we get children before they get to the juvenile justice system. And the way that we do that is through the same type of programs that they were just talking about. You need somewhere for them to go, you need positive things for them to do, and you need to be able to provide them guidance and discipline. And that's kind of what I think is the best way for us to handle the process as far as kids are concerned.
Now, we have much more ahead on our town hall Operation Crime and Justice. We'll continue right after the break.
Now, leadership, always a question when people are worried about crime. What are those best practices?
We're back with another one of our panels. Let's introduce everyone really quickly. We have State Representative Alan Treadaway. We then have also State Representative Wandalyn Gavan. Joining us also State Senator Roger Smitherman, and then with the Fraternal Order of Police, D'Angelo Hall. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Now, I want to start with the lawmakers here. You know, I know that there's been a lot of efforts at times. One thing that was brought up earlier this year was mirroring the federal law when it comes to Glock switches. I want to ask you all the same question. Will that make a difference?
Yeah, I think it'll make a difference. It'll make a tremendous difference. And we need to have an enhancement. Whatever that punishment is now that's on the books, we need to enhance it up another notch. Anytime you have somebody who's going to be that careless to take a gun that's totally out of control and shoot toward a crowd, we need to remove them. They are dangerous to society, and they need to be removed. And that's one of the problems that we are having now, is because of the concern that we have and of things that have happened to us in the past as a people. We sometimes let the pendulum go too far to the side we're concerned, and not allowing law enforcement to do their job. You know, it's about high time that we allow them to have stops in our communities, those traffic stops. Those same thing you heard about, checking those book bags out, you know, and to come in and do whatever they need to do, especially with violent crimes. We need to let them take the gloves off or put them on, whatever you call it, and let them do their job. But that's the only way. It's just like you saw in that person that was speaking on TV. They're saying they don't fear the officers now. They don't fear them. And it needs to get, when they come in, it needs to be a certain level of respect that you have, no matter who you are or what it is. Next thing, we need to do something about conflict resolution. 40-some% of the homicides are domestic violence, whether people know it or not. And we need to have a conflict resolution. I'm looking at getting some conflict resolution when people get married. You need to take a course right before you get married so that you can know what conflict resolution is. In our schools, we have a civic class I think we're teaching now. I'm looking to put a chapter in that class that teaches these kids. Every child in school in the state is exposed to conflict resolution. We've got to do that. You know, we at a time now that, you know, all hands on deck, and we need to support these officers 100% of what they're doing.
And let me just simply say, listen, for me, you all have heard me over the course of the past few weeks. Listen, first of all, you got to call these people what they are. They're killers. They're killers. They're thugs, they're punks, they're cowards. If you would dare to take the life of someone else in an open space for which you have chosen to shoot in without any fear of hitting or any sense of caring that you may kill someone else, you are an absolute killer. Listen, the realization is we can put 1,000 more books on the laws on the books. I have several pieces of legislation out there now. The bump stock piece of legislation that I've just sponsored in. I've sponsored it in over the course of the last few years. But the realization is, does that stop that person who's going out on the streets to buy an illegal gun? Most of the guns that are being purchased, these apparatuses, have been bought in the black market. Until we treat this process like the crack cocaine era of our time, crack cocaine began to dissipate somewhat in the 80s when we went after the distributors. You've got to get to these people who look like me, who look like him, who may look like the other person next to me that may be selling these guns in the black market within their neighborhoods. As mentioned, the book bags. Listen, a lot of these crimes could be stopped if we would stop, not just to say, if I see something, say something. No, you've got to do something. If you're seeing a young man or a young girl walking up and down the street, should be in school, walking with that book bag, or walking into your house and you don't know what's in that bag, you're not picking up the phone to call the district attorney's office. He has a program set up for that. You're not calling law enforcement. We know our law enforcement is overtaxed, but I guarantee you a Birmingham police officer would rather you call him or her ahead of time versus that same young man with that book bag being determined to be an assailant. And lastly, for me, it's really simple. Listen to the citizens, come closer. You've got to open your blinds up. You've got to open your windows up at home, and you've got to say to somebody, listen, we need better neighborhood watches, but most importantly, you see a child doing something, you've got to now make that tough call to reach out, to do something and be proactive. A lot of these crimes could be stopped ahead of time. Everything we've heard here has been when it's happened. We've got to deal with before it happens.
I want to jump in here because I feel like there's been a lot of disconnect between city leadership along with state leadership. Why do you think that is? Where is the disconnect and how do we solve that problem?
Well, I don't think there's a disconnect. I think it's been very clear. I know the senators talked about the Glock switch. You'll see a bipartisan effort on that again this year. We can pass all the laws we want to pass, but if we don't have a force capable of addressing the issues in this area then the violent crimes can continue to go up. And that's just a fact. We are half the department we were not too long ago. I patrolled these streets for 31 years. A lot of the great ideals we're having from the members of the community, they're great ideals, but they're not a replacement for boots on the ground. You've got to have officers on the street. Not only you got to have them on the street, and we got the president of the Fraternal Police over here. I know he's heard from many of his members. I've heard from them. They don't have the help, they don't have the support from the elected officials. We got to get back to where we support them. You know, we've went through a decade or so of demonizing the law enforcement profession. We have to get back to where we support them, where people on the street want to become a police officer, and the ones that are there want to stay. It's not the case. There's been an exodus of officers out of this county, specifically the city of Birmingham, to where it's put us in a crisis and the job cannot be done. So we are talking about violent crime here. When these individuals commit murders and rapes and these serious assaults, it's too late for all these other programs. You have to have a force that's capable to go after these folks, and we're not capable of doing that right now. You can ask any police officer on the street. You've got to have the elected officials allowing the police professionals to do their job. Far too often, and we're seeing it across this country, especially in the state of Alabama, recently put on a violent crime detail by the speaker. And what we're seeing in some of our areas that have the most violence, their staffing levels are critically low, number one. Number two, the police departments are being run by City Hall. You're hiring professionals, have a lifetime experience in this area, and you're not allowing them to do the job. Get back to allowing them to do the job, get the staffing levels up, and go after these criminals and get them off the street.
And I know Hall is going to close out, but since we were on the state side, I just wanted to say one thing. He's absolutely correct. We don't have a problem working in a cooperative, manner with local government, but everything cannot be taken as a criticism when we raise these issues. We're trying to come up with a solution. The numbers, and the media has a role to play in this. He mentioned those numbers. And I know Hall and the FOP, they've done an excellent job, and we commend them. The realization of why these numbers now become important to the citizens is because citizens have to now know that they need to be in a posture to make common sense decisions as to where they go, what they do, because the numbers are down, that the response time may not be as swift or as quick, as well as the fact, as we just shared in a town hall meeting the other day, you have criminals who are literally driving past police stations that are literally counting the number of cars. So they know the numbers are down. The criminals already know this. We have to equip the citizens with the truth at this point so they can protect themselves if law enforcement cannot get to them immediately.
Now we're going to continue with this panel moving forward. We will give you a chance to speak right here. Do you want to go ahead and give some thought?
Yes, I would. So sitting here listening, I'm hearing a lot of great things, and I'm hearing the matters that involves a lot as relates to police. But there is something that is unspoken. There was a process of defunding the police. We forget about that.
We do.
When you cry out, and mind you now, that was a very small group of people screaming defund the police. But there was another 99% of the people that wasn't saying anything about we need the police. So we come not to an impasse, but we're in a position now to where we allowed a small percentage of people to dictate how law enforcement should work. Point blank period. You talk about backpacks on the streets, guess what? These officers want to go to work. They want to get out here, they want to hit the streets because guess what? They want to live in Birmingham, they want to spend their money in Birmingham, and they want their kids to enjoy all the amenities that Birmingham has to offer. But it's difficult when, if an officer gets out there, does his job to perfection, he is ridiculed in public, he is ridiculed on social media, he is investigated, he loses funding, and then once he's back in service, he really don't want to work anymore. So you have laws that are in place right now that is not conducive for policing. So you want us to stop guys with backpacks, guess what? Laws say we can't.
And that's why I will say what I said, that we've got to allow you all be police officers. And something else, we got to pay y'all more. I'm talking about some real money. I ain't talking about no $5,000 more a year or something. Y'all need to be coming in somewhere around $60,000 a year. Coming in. You know, and we've got to face the fact that we are in an employees market now. Unemployment is some percent. You know, now you have employees, you've got to have good pay, you've got to have good incentive, good benefits. and you got to have the best working conditions that you can possibly get
Yes.
to get the staffing where we need.
Yes.
We need a special, bring in even specialized people
Yeah.
to help even in the investigative part, because we need more people on staff, not the ones we have not good, but they need help.
Yeah.
And you do that by getting the resources and the funds. One last thing, it's a bill down there in the legislature trying to say that I think the governor or whoever else can come in and appoint a person that's over a city police department. That's not going to be the solution. The solution, you're going to need resources. You know, if you just appoint somebody else and you got the same staffing level that he's saying, you're not going to get the results that you need. So we've got to be willing to prioritize how we spend our money. It's no different than what you do at home. You know, if we want public safety, that's got to be number 1, 2, and 3 as we go down the list. And then we deal with those things at 6, 7, and 8.
And we're going to get Representative Dan. That's going to be the last one for this panel.
I agree with mostly what I've heard. The realization is, whether I'm for or not in support or not in support of the bill that Representative Reed has that he sponsored, the realization, it goes back to what Representative Treadaway said. You cannot run the Birmingham Police Department out of City Hall. It cannot be run by the mayor. No mayor, not Arrington, not Bell, not Kincaid, not Langford, attempted to run the Birmingham the police department. We have layers of government for reasons. There is a legislative, there is a judicial, and there is an executive branch. Our officers at this point, all I hear is the morale is low. We've got to figure out how do we pay them more money? How do we build the morale of these officers so when they come to work, they feel that they are appreciative? But most importantly, I don't care who appoints at this point the police chief. If we need a police chief in place that we can build the morale of these officers, they can be a commander in chief. I do not care at this point who does it. All I want is for these people to get to a point, these law enforcement officers to get to a point that we can put them back out in the community. And lastly, for me, it's simple. We're working on a plan, and I appreciate the plan that's out there. But we're looking at 30-something possibly graduating out of this recruitment class that's going in November. That's not going to do it. We have a few that we're trying to hold on that would have retired by the end of the year. I said to Hall, and I mean it, and I'll repeat it again. We need a plan right now, boots on the ground, to figure out how to, within the next 90 days to 6 months, to get at least 100 retired officers, or those who have left Birmingham, that we can begin to build shifts and work these shifts out to put them back into our communities to have a presence. Community policing is job number 1 and should be priority number one, regardless of a committee or whoever's on the committee. Listen, at the end of the day, for every dope house, there's a church house on every corner somewhere. So the question is, if you're driving into the church house and you're not doing anything about the dope house because you no longer live in that community, and we have become desensitized to the communities within Birmingham, within these 99 communities. And until that mentality change, I don't care how many laws you pass, it's not going to work.
Now, we have much more ahead on our town hall operation, Crime and Justice. We'll continue right after the break. Now, we've heard from a lot of politicians and community leaders over the past hour. Now another perspective, a Birmingham man who served 18 years in prison.
Given a second chance by the city, he now works as a supervisor. We asked for his take on what is at the heart of the violence.
It's hard to tell a kid what to do at the age of 16 when they consider they their own man, they make their own money, they do what they want to do. They don't listen to nobody, they don't fear nobody. Plus the kids don't fear the police, they don't fear their parents, and it starts in the home. So if that's not home training, there's not proper home guidance, and there's proper not male figures in those kids' life, you know, it's runaway kid. The lawmakers need to, like yesterday, did something about the gun. You got guys walking around with backpacks on them. You got police riding up and down the road to see the backpack. You have to start stopping and checking these backpacks. So as a parent, you have to make a decision what you want your kid to do. Do you want your kid to be alive? Do you want your kid to be productive? Or do you want your kid to be dead or in prison?
Now you just heard from Jerry Artis, and he says another major problem is also rap music, which he calls gangster killer music. He says kids are idolizing this. He recommends giving children more positive things to do in the city.
Scenes all too familiar across the metro area, guns and violence. How can Birmingham fight back?
I believe that a lot of the crime we see now are young people who doesn't have the expression of creativity, so they act out in a different way. And so I want to give them that avenue and also kill the stereotype from parents and other people that you can't make a living doing this. Oh, yes, you can.
From gang member to painter, Steve Skipper grew up in Homewood, joining a gang at 13. A pastor dared him to go to church. He never looked back, staying 48 years. From there, he became an artist, even painting a portrait of the Queen of England, now hoping his story inspires others.
And we have a lot of folks that are working to make a difference, and the heat right now is on the city administration along with the police department to do more. So we have our final panel here. What are you all's thoughts on this? What else can we do?
Well, I mean, I think it's important that, again, that we understand that there are layers to this. You know, we have to focus on the mindset of young people. We have to focus on, obviously, gun control again. We have to focus on what does justice look like for people as relates to the DA. You know, does justice, is it more jail time? Is it more diversion courts? Is it second chance? I mean, are those all married together to make a better impact in the community? I think we have to look at all of those situations and find out what's working, what's not, what's received good and what's not, and just figure out what we can do to make a difference in our respective positions.
Now, what do you think the impact is? I know a lot of these situations that we have, especially in Birmingham and Jefferson County, a lot of these crimes are going unsolved. What do we think that does when it comes to criminals thinking about committing a crime?
So the research is clear that it's certainty of arrest and prosecution that is a deterrent. It's not a long forever prison sentence. And what we've relied on in the past that has failed is life and life without parole prison sentences, because like some of your guests who've talked about being rehabilitated and contributing now, like Mr. Skipper, these are old people who outgrew criminality. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of similar people locked up in the prisons now in Alabama. That's why we're building a $1 billion prison to house a bunch of older people who've outgrown criminality. Instead of doing things like expanding Medicaid, which would provide some of the mental health care and the public health solutions that would stop crime from happening now and provide services to these young people. So it's about resources and changing the way we invest money in Alabama.
And I would pick up, you know, where DA Carr and Carla talked about, you know, the holistic approach, you know, as DA Carr does a second chance, but did people ever have a first chance? Building out the ecosystem, offering the resources, making sure that we can offer those at a high risk, you know, these opportunities. As Carla alluded to, you know, $1 billion prison, no expansion in Medicaid. Medicaid can be used to build, you know, for gun violence prevention. You know, looking at this from a public health approach. We've heard, you know, raising the numbers up, but who's talked about what does it take to be a police officer? The bottom line is, you know, policing in America is just not what it used to be. The traditional policing is just not there. People are not interested in law enforcement. So we have to figure out a way, or I don't have to figure out a way. Those that have a heart for law enforcement have to figure out a way to recruit and retain. You know, go back into the schools and talk to the young people about what does policing look like? What does a career in policing, you know, really look like? But until we approach this gun violence from a public health approach, you know, I've done the research. I brought back evidence-based practices to the city, to introduce into the city, but I would highly challenge those that were here today to go outside of the city and go to places like Boston and Baltimore and Newark, New Jersey, and spend some days there so you can really understand what community violence intervention is all about.
I think we have to be intentional about bridging the gap between law enforcement and our communities. It's a must, because no one knows better what's going on in the community than the people who live there. Right. And so we have to build that trust. We have to get that understanding. We have to get our community members to have buy-in to what we're trying to do. So we do have a lot more work to do in terms of law enforcement.
We want to thank you and all of our other guests for joining us on our town hall, Operation Crime and Justice. ABC 3340 News will, of course, continue to cover this important topic.
And we invite you to share your views online, make your voice heard.